All right. The next part that we're going to do here, now that we've moved it over that part of the grid, we're now going to make sure that, again, that it's all sitting correctly in the right place. So I've got it placed correctly inside of this particular view. I'm going to also check my right and front views to see where we're at. Okay, so we're kind of floating way up above everything. So we're going to move everything down. Again, your cameras and lights at this point in the project process will have little bearing on the design or the export, because the cameras and lights do not export with the file, just the model does, the model information. So I'm going to check also my right view. And again, because we've rescaled our model quite a ways down, it is much smaller. All right. So I can also see that my object is a little bit low on the screen. Drag it up a bit. Hold on. And I'm going to actually switch to where I select only objects in my screen. So I'm going to go over to my outliner and hold down Shift and grab my objects. And I'm going to go to my right view. I'm going to drag them just up above this green line. That does represent the ground plane on a side view, or a red line on this side view. So we just want to make sure it sits right on top of it. Okay, so now what we need to do is, this is just a review from the previous, one of the previous exercises with the project, where you need to review all your models in your design and make sure that you have only mesh objects. So again, if you have any objects floating in your design that are made of curves, metaballs, surface NURBS, or text from Blender, then you will need to convert them into mesh objects. And again, all you have to do is select them respectively in your outliner panel to make it easy, and then go down to Object on the lower menu panel. And again, you have to do this in object mode. Go to Object, go up to Convert To, and select Mesh from Curve, Meta, Surf, or Text. And that will convert that object respectively into an actual mesh object at that time. Alright. Our next step in our project process is to determine how many polygons or triangles our model is made of. Augment is sensitive to the number of triangles that an entire model can be made of, or an entire scene. It does say in Augment that you can upload up to 1 million triangles, but the truth is that most models uploaded at that size don't operate very effectively on a mobile device. So my recommendation to keep it even and to even out the playing field so that anyone can open your model is to keep your model pretty low on the triangle count. If you want to know how many triangles your scene has, look up here at the top, and you'll see like an area that says tries, and there's verts, faces, and triangles up here on this top menu bar. This is your information bar. If this is invisible, go to the icon on the far side and switch it to the I for info. But you should have a listing here for the triangles and faces present in your scene. So mine says it has 19,460 triangles. Now it also says that it has 10,000 faces present in the scene, which tells me that there are certain polygons in the scene that are made of square or oblong forms that are non-triangular. So when we export, those forms will actually get split or broken down into triangles. So this number could effectively double, and we could end up adding to our triangle count a lot more. But we're well under the number. For 19,000, that's nothing. So easy fix. But if you happen to be in that position where your triangle count is huge and your models are occupying a lot of space inside the system, we need to knock some things down. We're going to need to change that count. We got to reduce it so that it works correctly. So I'm going to pretend like my monkey is the model that represents the most dense image or dense imagery on this design. So I'm going to look at it in wireframe, and you can just kind of visually look at your objects in wireframe shader mode, and you will see the differences in density for objects. So I can tell that the monkey is actually pretty dense. Of all my objects, the monkey is the most dense. This is not bad. Metaballs, they're really not bad either, but that monkey looks pretty dense. So to check to see how many polygons our current monkey is rated for, or how many it actually has on it, we're going to go over here to the Properties panel. And we're going to look at a modifier. So we're going to go to the blue wrench icon. We're going to add a modifier. I'm going to go to the Generate column and use the one called Decimate. Now, when you open Decimate, it'll pull up some properties here. And it will give you a number down here where it says faces. That tells you how many faces your object is currently made of. I'm going to go ahead and check this box for triangulate, so that as I reduce the size of the object, the number of faces will change equally, but it will also triangulate the surface of the object as I change its shape. So watch over here as I drag the ratio slider down. It's going to collapse polygons together or merge them as I reduce this. So you can see my model here too. You can also watch as that number, as I take the ratio down, the object's surface quickly gets simplified more and more as I go. You can see it very well in this view. We can also switch our shader back to solid. And here in a second, you're going to start seeing it change in the physical model. You'll start to see quality get reduced. Decimate does remove polygons to help reduce the count on your model to make it more viable for augment. But do be careful, because you take out too much and you will lose too much detail in your model to where all textures and things applied to it will not work very effectively until your model doesn't make sense anymore. So very careful. Only drag that ratio down as much as you need to reduce the triangle count. Now notice the triangles change up here whenever you reduce this number. So only take it down as far as you need it to get it within range or boundary. Now if you have multiple objects in your scene that are very dense on polygons, you may need to go and do this decimate modifier to each of those objects, and then adjust the ratio accordingly on each one a little bit until they all balance out the number. You don't want to drag one model all the way down to reduce it too much compared to the others. Again, to sort of equal out the detail differences in your scene. So that's how you do that in case you need to reduce polygon count. So I'm going to go ahead and hit X to cancel it for mine. Come out of object isolation mode. Remember, you can hit the / above your number 9 on the number pad. Okay. And now we're ready to start exporting our work. So the last thing I want to do before I export is I need to actually reorient my model to face the correct direction for our exhibition purposes. With Augment, everything is dependent on the direction your model faces, which is how it will be displayed when it pulls up in front of your tracker image. Now part of that occurs whenever it's determining which way it faces. It uses your ground plane origin area. It looks at that and thinks of it as the position your tracker image is placed. So if I was looking at it in here, I might think that the tracker image is laying flat on a table surface, much like my grid is like the top of a table right now. Now for our exhibition purposes, we're going to be putting the table up, we're going to be putting the tracker on the wall, so it's going to be vertical instead of laying flat on a surface like this, or down on the ground. So I need to get my model to face away from this direction of the surface. And to determine the correct direction, we're going to actually have it face straight away from the ground and up towards the sky. So to do that, I'm going to come into my right view, and I'm going to select all of my object components. I can hit A a couple times to grab everything if you want to. Actually, I think that it would be easier to just grab your objects at this point so that you have an axis right over them. So I'm going to go back up to my outliner and hold down Shift to grab each of my respective objects. And then I'm going to move into my right view, and I'm going to rotate them 90 degrees to where they face the ceiling. So in my right view, I'm going to hit the R key, shortcut for rotate, and rotate my model until it faces straight upwards. Now I can tell which way it's facing right now by just watching it. Now I can turn on my material view or my solid shader and to make sure that in the top view, my model is facing straight at me. That's how I know that it's facing the right direction now. But you should make, again, it should be a perfect 90-degree rotation on your object, negative 90 degrees. If you notice in my object menu right now, it tells me that that object is rotated negative 90, about, so it's close enough to not be a problem, even if it's off by a few points. But now it's set for that part. I also want to make sure the model is still resting on top of the ground, not below it, because Augment will use that information, that location information, to position your model over your tracker. That means if you position your model way up here, it's going to use that distance to space your model away from the tracking image. Likewise, if you shoot your model off to the left or the right. So keep it centered over the ground plane the best you can. And right now with all my objects selected, the location of this axis is also the same location that Augment will use to rotate my object based on, or to position it from. So I'm going to position the center of this axis kind of roughly over the intersection of this green and red line. All right. Now I've got it set, it's above the line, it's aimed in the right direction. We're good to export. So we're going to go up to File. We're going to go all the way down to Export, and we're going to use the option called Collada DAE. There are other options here listed for exporting. Wavefront OBJ and STL are formats common to 3D printing. Just as a side note, in case you ever decide you want to try out 3D printing with a model, you can use those. There are other settings, of course, that have to be adjusted for making a 3D model print ready that your model may not have rigged yet. So those are things that you may want to review or look up or look into in the module. I do have a section on 3D printing that you're welcome to look at, but it's not related to work that's required for this project. All right, let's go to Collada, click it. And here, of course, make sure the location that it exports to is correct, and the title you don't really need to change. We are going to come down here to the lower left side of the screen for the Export Collada options, and we're going to change a few things. First off, you can check the box for apply modifiers if you forgot to have any modifiers that you've added to your objects applied. This is a great time, it'll just do it automatically for you. I've done all mine, so I don't need to worry about that. The one that's important here is texture options. You want to include UV textures and include material textures. That's just important whenever we're assigning this, because otherwise your textures, your images that you've tied to your objects will not travel with your model, and they will not display correctly inside of Augment. Your model will otherwise just look white. You also want copy checked for that part. If you come down further, Collada options, triangulate is something you have to have checked because triangulated imagery or triangulated polygons is required for augmented reality applications. You don't need to use object instances. An interesting note on the side is that the armature, if you ever learn how to or decide to go deeper into Blender with learning how to animate and use armatures as an animator, you can actually translate that into an Augment engine. It will read the bone structures in an object or the armature and read the animation from those so that you can have a live animated feature or a live animated object. All right, we got all of our things selected, so we're going to go ahead and export it. And we're going to minimize Blender, and we're going to check our folder that we put it into. So I'm going to go into my Blender folder. And inside here, you should notice a few things have happened. Now I had some things stored in this file previously, including my original textures, but you can see in here that it has added my Blender file plus the material textures that I originally started with. I've made a copy of them in the folder. So I'm going to take my file, and what we need for Augment is our next step, and we're going to have to zip all this stuff together for that part. Now we'll do all of that in the next exercise, but that concludes this particular exercise on exporting out your model from Blender in order to have it ready for displaying in Augment. All right, catch you in the next exercise where we finish off in putting it into